lot of people say, your receivers, your quarterbacks, your running backs are your weapons. No, your offensive line is your biggest weapon because if you don't have a line, you're not going nowhere. You don't stop learning. You're always learning. There's always more to the game, always learning from, different coaches.
That victory or that Super Bowl at the end of the season is the paycheck.
You know?
Everybody say family, but we got a family.
Welcome, guys, to the Young Athletic. How you doing today?
Good in yourself.
I'm good. I'm with Coach Zack and Coach Doc of the North Oxnard Warriors. How was the season this year?
It was a good season.
Yeah.
We took a big step from our junior year to our senior year. I think we won maybe 1-2 games last year, turned around and went to the 6-2.
Yeah.
6-2 to semifinals.
Awesome.
Last year, I think we did the same thing. We were semifinals again.
Yeah. But that year I wasn't coaching. I took a break off last year.
Oh, so you're the difference maker?
He is the difference maker.
I didn't
He is
say
the,
that.
yeah,
I
he
wouldn't
is the
say
difference
that,
maker.
but,
Yep.
all the puzzles on the end of the play got to be there.
I know there are a lot of coaches in football. Do you have a specialty?
Like
Well,
I did. Go.
Yeah, I was defense. So
Defense? Okay.
And then I was offense.
You're the offense?
Yeah.
What makes a good defensive coach and a good offensive coach?
Well, I think for offense, you gotta see it from a defensive standpoint. You gotta see what they're running to versus what the scheme you're trying to do as a offensive coordinator. You gotta see the whole field. You can't just see what you're trying to do. You gotta, every play has to be a setup for the next one.
Yeah.
And then, play, and then you got to make sure you're putting the right players in the right positions to succeed. And, everybody's goal at the end of the game is to win a game. We got to put our best players out there versus their best players.
What about defensively? What's the trick?
Like you said, personnel placement is real important, man. You got to see the kids' talents and make sure they're in the right place to make plays.
Yeah, I think about that in soccer because, I put my more defensive, trustworthy people in the back and then maybe a wild card person in the front. Do you guys think about personality and personnel that way?
Yeah, it's kind of the same, from an offensive perspective. Your first point of you're attacking your opponent is you got to have a strong offensive line, and then if you don't have a line, you're not going to go nowhere. It's gonna make it harder for you to try to move the ball and try to score points. But, a lot of people say, your receivers, your quarterbacks, your running backs are your weapons. No, your offensive line is your biggest weapon because if you don't have a line, you're not going nowhere.
Yeah, you don't have time.
Yeah, you got to give your quarterback time to throw the ball. You got to give your quarterback time to, depending if it's a run play or a pass play, there's time, a play lasts 3-4 seconds. Maybe shorter than that, just depending. If you have a good offensive line, they'll be able to, I would say, probably protect the quarterback for at least 3 seconds, and then go out there and we got to make a play.
Yeah, I don't think people realize how fast you have to make that decision as a quarterback.
Roughly 3 seconds.
Yeah.
You got to do
1, 2, 3, out.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Out or gone.
Yeah.
So what's the talent like on your teams? You got some good players?
Yeah, we added some players this year that made a big difference. We had a lot of first year players that made huge impacted on the team. The good thing is, it's good to have a talented athlete that's never played before because you can mold them to what your scheme you're trying to do. Versus, you got kids already knew the game. It's more just like a kind of like a refresher for them. Because, for us, for the last, 4 years that we had this team, we had the same core group, and we always had kids come in and out, but like we had this same core group. I would say probably 15, 16 players that stayed with us since they were 10 years old.
That's cool.
So it was a big impact, because it was kind of funny because I came from a different program before I came here. We actually played against each other.
You two played against each other?
We were both coaches. Okay. I was at El Rio. He was at North Oxnard, and we played each other twice in the season, and it was a competitive game.
Who won?
They did both times. Both times.
Coach Doc.
It's okay.
Part of the reason he wanted to come be part of the family,
Yeah, and that was another big thing about making the transition over. There was things that lined up. I kind of knew what I was going into as the head coach for our Bantam year / 10U. I already knew the skill set of each player. It's like who was on the team, as well as we we added a few more players, and then we had a good run that year, and then we actually won our you could kind of say like a D2 championship for our first year together. So that was a big thing coming together. I was a first year coach for them. They kind of already had their people on the staff already, but at the end of the day, we all came together as coaching staff, and it was all for the kids. We're just there to teach them the game. They're the ones putting all the effort, time at practice, executing plays, and then like we always tell the kids, the hard work is done. It's time to go cash out on Saturdays. Saturdays, it's cash out. Let's take all our hard work. Yeah, it's payday. We work so hard during the week, going over schemes, practice plans, game plans, conditioning, and then we take our skills and what we taught them the week, and we go put it on the field Saturday night, Saturday afternoon, depending on the time what it was.
Yeah, I've noticed that football teams and soccer teams are different in how they train and how they play. Football, you're really gearing up for a game at the end of the week. In soccer, you got games whenever and practices whenever.
We practice the day before a game in soccer.
Yeah. I think that we did we did 4 days, 3 full days, and 4 days.
Kind of like a walkthrough before the game on Saturday.
Yeah. Plus, the tradition that we did was it was a walkthrough day, and we also did team dinner. Team dinners. It's celebrating the boys. You guys worked hard. Let's have a little team dinner.
Every week? Yeah.
We had a team dinner every week for the last 4 years.
It's like at someone's house?
No, we usually just did it at the field. Parents, we're grateful for the parents that we had on the team. Team mom, she always, it was different 2 parents from each player every different week. Like one would bring food, the other one would bring dessert, drinks.
Really?
Yeah, it was a good culture. We had a great culture with the team that we had. It was fun, win or loss. We always went and celebrated, because we played hard. If we came home with the win, we came home with the win. If we didn't, hey, it's a lesson learned. Let's learn from our mistakes, and then let's get it after, for the next game.
How long have you guys been coaching?
I've been coaching for 13 years. Yeah.
How about you, Doc?
Well, I did 5 years in football. I actually started out coaching soccer.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Why soccer?
Because my son was playing, and I kind of got, at the meeting trying to figure out what was going to go on with the team, kind of got thrown under the bus.
Oh, yeah.
Needed a parent to volunteer, and nobody was doing it, and I could just hear that voice in my back of my head saying, "Go ahead, Doc, step up." And one side saying, "Bro, you don't know nothing about soccer. What do you mean step up?" And
did you like it?
actually did. We did good, too. Yeah. It wasn't, the real competitive. It was the AYSO, but we did pretty good, I know how to put talent where it needs to be.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
Putting people in the right spots.
No, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Sometimes you look at people and you think, what's going on? How don't you see this kid needs to be here and not there?
So I'm assuming you guys both played
I
football at
did.
some point?
I played from what 6 years old all the way up to high school.
Local here?
Yeah, I went to I played for El Rio, and then I played at Rio Mesa, and Moon was actually my defensive coordinator.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, so it's a small world.
Yeah.
Piggyback to one of your podcasts. Moon was defense coordinator for Rio, and then Marcus was actually one of my teammates.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, it's a small world.
Wow.
But at the end of the day, it's like we took what we learned when we played, and now we're all coaching now.
Did you know back then that you wanted to be a coach?
Actually, I think I was my junior year, I had just started coaching. I wasn't like a head coach, but I was like an assistant coach helping out. I would just go to practice, and then after practice, I would just go help out. It was a young team, so there was 6, 7 graders, or no, not 6, 7 graders, 6, 7 year olds.
Oh,
So they were young. They're excited. Having a high school player come coach them, so they got the fun out of it, and I think that's where I started coaching, and then just I think from there on, it's like it was every year after that.
did you play too, Doc?
I played in Louisiana.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah,
Is that where you're from?
yeah, I'm from Louisiana. So I bring his style of coaching and my style of coaching it kind of go together.
How did you end up here?
And well, that's a long story, but I actually was up in the Bay Area for a while first, doing music, and I have family up there. And then, meet my wife that was from the Valley.
Oh, okay.
And once we had our first kid, we moved this way to be closer to her mom and stuff.
Nice.
And we invested the kids, I got a daughter that cheers, play flag football for Pacifica.
Oh, yeah, right now?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then, yeah, we invested. We're here.
That's awesome. Yeah, I had Coach Mike on, as you mentioned, and every time he comes on, he's all business, and I love it.
Yeah, with Moon, he actually knows a lot, and it's like like I always say as a coach, there's never a point you don't stop learning. You're always learning. There's always more to the game. Always learning from different coaches. Like for me, I know a lot of high school coaches out here. From Moon to Bittner to Coach Morphin at Wainimi. It's just there's a lot of people. And you just can't stop learning. It's kind of like, it's networking, especially when it comes to, youth football. Everybody knows everybody. We all know each other. It's like when hey, we got this game. Oh, we know so-and-so on that team. And there's always that rivalry where it's like either know the coaches or the kids know kids on the team that they go to school with. So it's always a fun, competitive, especially when, we know coaches on that coaching staff. The kids know the kids on that team. It just makes it fun, competitive. They talk about it all week at school, and then they get to, Saturday and just, hey, it's all business. They might be your friend during the, off the field, but at the end of the day, it's like a business. We're here to win the game, and we're out there, it's kind of, you always got to make it fun for the kids. Always make it fun. At the end of the day, they're kids. You got to make it fun. You got to make it memorable for them because, like our team, they're going to high school next year. We had to teach them football and teach them. And it wasn't just about football too, because I think the biggest thing was, you're a student athlete. Student always come first. Doesn't matter how talented of a player you are, you gotta be a student at first, because if you don't got the grades and you try to go play high school ball, high school coaches, they don't care how talented you are. If you don't got the grades, you're not gonna play.
Yeah, it's important.
Yeah, it's very important.
Is it somewhat exciting to see where they might go?
Yeah, we always have that conversation. It's like, well, where's so and so gonna go? Like, you got to look at it that their perspective. You got to see what's gonna be the best for them, and where they're gonna go. If they keep playing football, if they go play a different sport, but at the end of the day, you got to look at it like academic wise, like what's this school doing for academics? Because sports is just like the cherry on top, but we just got to worry about the athletic part or the scholarship or what school they're going to because I think the biggest thing is school. School's big.
Academics.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not going anywhere without good grades.
Yeah,
I used
exactly.
to coach high school age boys, the club level, and I tell them if you want to play Division One, the easiest way to get there is good grades. They have more scholarship opportunities for players with good grades than just playing talent alone.
Yeah. 'Cause I think get good grades, go take care of business first in the classroom, then take care of business on the field. Because once you do good in school, that's going to come into play later in life when it's like your senior year in high school, when you start looking at, where do I want to go to college? Or if you're going to start getting offers from colleges to go, you're going to go to, it doesn't matter if it's like a JUCO or D1, D2, D3. Like, at the end of the day, you get a scholarship to any of those type of divisions, like it's something.
Yeah,
It's
you go take it.
yeah, you take what you get, because there's a lot of people out there that will never experience that part. But if you're talented enough and you got the grades for it,
Do you feel like different kind of pressure, coaching the most popular sport in the States?
I feel like you could call it pressure. You just want to make sure. I mean, you have kids, this is where it starts for them. And if you're not teaching them right and setting them up right, you could actually set them up for failure going into high school and college and, or so on. But so, yeah, as a youth coach and in football, knowing how important it is for those kids to be prepared, it can be pressure. So you want to make sure you're doing your homework, you're studying right, you're preparing for the game, preparing for practice, and setting them up in the right spot,
What's the sign of a good coach that might, prepare their kids versus someone who would set them up for
Well, if you
failure?
know football, it's kind of easy to see when a coach is a bad coach. And you can't say a bad coach because, for one, if he's out there, trying, because you coaches, we don't get paid, Zach, I give him a lot of respect. He don't even have a kid out there playing, so they got, coaches that are out there to coach their kids.
Yeah.
They got coaches that are out there that really out there for the kids. And some that don't even have a kid. So a guy that's volunteering all that time with no kids, you give him a whole lot different respect. So make sure I say that correctly. But they do have bad coaches.
Yeah. Yeah. There's levels of talent.
Right. Some coaches you think, you don't realize you're a bad coach. You know what I'm saying? Maybe give somebody else the position. But whatever put them in that position to be coaching, you want to make sure that these kids are getting taught properly and ready for high school. They're going to go off to high school, and the coaches going to know, depending on where they came from. Like coaches will tell you, who the hell taught you in youth football? What was they teaching you? You don't know, get on the side, kid. And then you can tell when they was taught properly, Make it easier for the coaches in high school and so far.
Yeah, hopefully the majority of your kids are the second part. They're top.
Right, yeah.
I think that was like another big part, like teaching the kids. It's there's always the learning part. What did we learn from practice? What did we learn from the game, win or lose? Because you can't be always satisfied with the win. There's always the negatives in that win. We had too many bad snaps, too many fumbles, too many interceptions. How do we eliminate that? I think it's more of taking the small things from a win and polishing it up and making sure we don't make that same mistake.
You guys watch film already?
Oh, we were watching film since Bannermere. We are 10-year-olds.
Really?
Yeah, we were watching film. Film's a big thing. Film is big. That was usually our kind of like our Monday practice. Monday's practice was always a film day, as well as depending if we did conditioning, and or we'll just go over like kind of like a walkthrough type day. But usually we try and do the most productive out of Mondays because Mondays is still kind of fresh. Saturdays were games. They had one day to kind of think about what happened, and then we go in, watch film, watch it play by play, take what play didn't work versus hey, we threw an interception. We're marching the ball down the field versus hey, we scored within 6 plays on a scheme.
Yeah.
But I think film is always a big part of.
You watch it with the kids, or do you send it to them like clips
Both.
of it?
We had Huddle. So Huddle is it's a type of film. Once we record the game, it gets loaded up into Huddle, and it breaks it down play by play. It's not the whole 2 hours. It could be a 2 hour film broken down to like 45 minutes.
Does Huddle have actual cameras now? I remember Huddle was a software.
Yeah, actually, like for
Certain
us,
schools have it set up in the
the press box.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like for us, like when we had a home game, all we did was we updated it to, all right, we're playing at 5 o'clock. It starts filming at 5 o'clock, and then it's usually
streaming it live.
Yeah,
for the
they're
home game.
streaming live. Yeah, there was we had parents that couldn't make it to the games, and we'll send them the link and they'll be able to watch it. And
My
then
family will be watching the games at home in Louisiana.
Really?
yeah, it shows the game, and then on the very left corner of it, it shows the scoreboard. So that technology nowadays, it's evolving.
What happened with the game last night with Ventura? They couldn't watch
I don't know.
it. I guess they weren't using Huddle.
Oh, it was. I think it was. They were using it on NFHS. That was the kind of like the high school networking.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what happened with it. So that was kind of like, because if it's not playing on, was it sports, Spectrum Sports, it's usually on NFHS. So I don't know. That was kind of weird.
But all your games have been streamed live, and they've
Yeah.
been
The
fine.
home games.
Yeah. Yeah, it was all our home games. For away games, we always had a parent or a coach that recorded it, and then we just uploaded it ourselves.
Wow, 10 years old watching film. That's cool.
It's the world of youth football is evolving to versus when we played. It's just like, hey, I didn't watch film when I was a kid versus to watching film now.
Let's talk a little bit about the NFL. You guys fans of the National Football League?
I'm a big Chargers fan. That's for sure. Yeah, I'm a big Chargers fan.
What about you,
I'm a
Doc?
Steelers fan.
Steelers?
Yeah.
Why? Yeah. Why the Steelers?
I kind of born into it, I have an uncle that's a diehard Steeler fan. He got me like Steeler gear when I was a kid and kind of fed it to me, and I've been a Steelers fan ever since.
Yeah, Steelers fans are like loyal.
Yeah.
They're everywhere.
You go any stadium, we probably be 50-50, you know? Yeah.
And you're a Chargers fan?
Yeah, I think I grew into it. Always going down to San Diego when they were first down there, watching LT in his prime. I was just a kid, but watching LT, Rivers, Gates in their prime versus to, oh, hey, we're in LA now. It's cool. We're a lot closer. I don't got to drive 3 hours to go watch a team. Now I go down hour to SoFi.
Have you gone to a game yet?
Yeah. Actually, it was the beginning of the season when we did the Chargers and Saints game. Yeah, we did an event with one of the other local teams, the Oxnard Knights. We sold tickets to watch the Chargers and Saints preseason, and we had to sell like a certain amount to be able to scrimmage on the field. So we were able to accomplish that. Everybody was super stoked about it. Then it was a fun experience for the kids because we were able to go down to the field and play a full scrimmage for a whole hour.
I think I saw that on your social media because I saw like little kids at SoFi.
Yeah.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Okay.
As well as we had our juniors team played their national Super Bowl at SoFi. And they played a really good, was it Simi Valley? That that Simi Valley team, they were really good. Like I think the coach said like they haven't lost a game in 3 years,
Whoa.
and our juniors came back and beat them. It was a really competitive game. Too, I think the score was probably what 12-6. It was super close, but like they were definitely hungry. They were definitely they played them last year in the Super Bowl. They went to back Super Bowls. Lost last year to the same team. They took that, worked twice as harder, and they ended up getting the Super Bowl this year. It was a good thing, especially they're going to be the next senior team because our team aged out.
So are they coming to you?
No, so
Restudying with a new group.
no, so with that is we technically we
follow you.
yeah we followed our team. So when we were 10, we just went up the year, and then that's what usually every team does. Is if you're a 12U team, you're gonna go up your team next year as a 13U.
So you're gonna start over with 10-year-olds?
It all depends. I'm not sure yet. Not sure. I'm not sure if I'm gonna go back to coaching youth. I kind of want to get into high school.
Really?
Yeah, I've had some talks with some schools out there to, coaching at the youth or high school level, and then I also talk to people of coming back to youth and helping out because there's always like a plus to both sides. Teaching the youth, getting them ready for high school. And then there's the part where you want to try high school and see what that level of football is. I'm sure it's way more competitive than youth, but at the end of the day, football's competitive, period.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what level you're at, if it could be Pee Wee ball to high school to college to NFL.
What about you, Doc? You gonna stick around and do another year?
I know that year last year without coaching, bro, it was hard. So I'm thinking I got a coach, actually one of the kids that's on the team this year. His son's gonna be playing, just starting out, and he asked me if I want to come out and help him. So I'll be somewhere on the field. Yeah, I'll be helping somebody. It's just my work schedule makes it hard for me to be a head coach.
I see.
I'm only able to be out there like 2 to 3 days a week. So
You guys have like a practice facility? How do you do it?
For the North Oxnard Warriors, we were at Oxnard High School.
And you keep all the equipment
Yeah,
there?
so
Like all the pads and stuff?
we have our own container with all our equipment,
Okay.
and then we go through Facilitron, and we the board rents out the practice fields, the game field, and that's usually practice. Mandatory practice starts in January, but like for us, we always started like January, February, because I think it's better to get an early start than let's not wait till July when teams are already practicing, because I think the biggest thing is like the more older your kids get, it's like you start doing 7-on-7s, 5-on-5 tournaments. That's kind of like where you're teaching them at practice. You go out there with these, they're considered like kind of like flag football. It's just 2-hand touch. You're
Are you guys 7v7 right now?
For what?
For the eighth graders, for the seniors?
We are. I do plan on doing a 7-on-7
But
with
like
them.
the season that just finished.
Yeah. So they got the high school 14U for 8th graders that are going to high school. So there's a few tournaments that's going to be happening. I know there's one that I want to do that's going to be in January. That one's hosted at Camarillo High School. It's a 2-day tournament, and there's always football going around. Football doesn't just stop after the season. There's off-season training, conditioning.
Do you have a spring season?
During the spring season, no. Well, I would say yes, because that's just we put out a practice schedule maybe once or twice a week, depending, or we'll take the boys out to we did a few beach days, took them to the sand hill.
that's when I feel you should get started. Spring training,
Okay.
And not a full week of practice, but at least getting them out there 2 days a week.
Yeah, because there's a lot of kids on the team. You know, not everybody plays multiple sports. You know, you can have one kid that just plays football, but if you're not doing nothing in the off season, like you're gonna, a lot of these kids are gonna be out of shape. And I think that was like a big thing for us. Like conditioning was always a big part of off season and in season practices. Like if you're not conditioned, you're not gonna last all 4 quarters. And we did some intense conditioning. What was the thing that the kids used to call it? It was like it was
Fridays?
Fridays.
Hardcore Fridays?
Hardcore Fridays. We used to call it Hardcore Fridays.
Yeah.
It was hardcore. Nothing.
Out of season.
It was out of season stuff. It was we didn't do nothing football related. It was just depending if it was an hour and a half, 2 hours. It was just nothing but conditioning. All legs, core, upper body.
It's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they're not conditioned, then, they can't perform at their highest potential, You could teach them the plays and give them the routes to run and whatever, but if they're not conditioned, they ain't going to last. And especially like Zach was saying for the line. Sometimes the line don't get the credit that they need, That's the trenches. Those boys get more touches than anybody on the field. Every snap, they got contact. So they got to make sure those boys are ready.
Yeah. And they're big.
Yeah, big boys too.
We had some big boys on the team this year.
Yeah, and they all got different personalities. That's what I like. All the kids are different. Sometimes you got the nerdiest kids that don't really want to be involved in the contact, but they got the football IQ. All the kids are different. They all bring something different to the team, and it's about putting them in the right place.
You guys have a lot of standout players on your team. When they got the mental, the physical, emotional, the IQ.
I wouldn't say a lot. I mean, you're lucky if you got a lot. Saying that got all of those, you must have a real good team. But they do have some that stand out, Yeah. And they got some dogs on the team that want it more than everybody else.
Yeah, the desire is important.
Yeah.
I think we had a lot of those players. A lot of kids that they wanted it. Especially a lot of those players. I wouldn't say a lot of those players. It's probably a good handful. We had kids that went both ways all game, and sometimes we see them tired, and it was like, hey, you gotta come out of the game. You gotta get a break. You gotta come out. And those kids they
don't want to come out.
Yeah, they'll tell us come on, coach, just go. Hey, just come out 2 plays, get some water, and you're gonna go right back in. Yeah. Yeah, we had a lot of hungry boys on the team, especially for the season that we had from last year to this year. A lot of the kids were hungry. They were definitely waiting for their senior season.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Football's the number one sport in the States. Maybe the youth just want it more.
And it's good when they want it. They get competitive. They make teammates more competitive. If you're doing good or you shining, you putting in that extra work, you got those few that follow and want to put that work in too. And it's better for the whole team, The more motivation they get, they motivate each other.
Yeah.
You want them all to want it.
Have you ever had to cut any players?
For youth football, no. You don't cut. You don't cut.
Not even the 8th graders?
Cut yourself.
No, because there's a registration fee. Everybody pays to play, but going back to what Coach Doc says, the 12-play player, just because you're my star athlete, if you're not doing what we need you to do, or you're joking around at practice, or we had a rule where you miss one practice, you don't play till second half. You miss 2, you just don't play. It's going to be the same thing for high school. You don't show up to practice, you're not going to play. There's 50, 60, 70 kids on a roster in high school. There's definitely somebody else that's going to take your spot. Like we always told the kids every week, no one's spot's guaranteed. You could be the starting quarterback one week, and next you're not starting the week after. So, it's a competitive sport, It's always the next man up, or the person behind you is trying to fight to start over you.
Do starters play most of the games? Because I know you can sub a lot in football.
We had a lot of starters, a lot of
Play
kids
both
that
sides of the ball.
yeah,
Play both
and then we had some players that were just strictly defense, and we had players that were strictly offense. I think that was just they're a bigger asset on either side of the ball.
And that group that like he said, that been playing with us from the beginning. A lot of those boys, they was taught that way. The culture. We had a limited amount of players in the beginning. We had like 15 players when we started. So some of those boys had to play Iron Man. They didn't come off the field.
Yeah.
And that's just that's embedded in them now. So they don't want to come off the field, even though we got 20-something kids now.
But they don't really do that in high school.
No, it's different. You got so many kids on the sideline. If you look at some of the games now, yeah, they got room for them to come off the field. But if you're an athlete and you're a star, you're a dog, you find yourself playing both sides still in high school.
Were you ever asked to play both sides?
Yeah, I did. I played both sides. I played D tackle, and then I played fullback. I got my one couple times, maybe a handful of times where they hand me the ball. I was just the one where you just, hey, let's just hand them the ball off in the middle of the field and just like straight diving down the middle. Yeah. None of that fancy stuff.
That's a good feeling.
So that's a good feeling. Not
being a running back, and
you
get that opportunity to get that ball.
Yeah, you just a what was it? They call it the bruiser. You're just taking the heavy hits for. Oh, hey, we just need 4 yards. Let's put this so and so in to get this 4 yards. But it was fun. I had a lot of fun in high school. It was very competitive to now. Now it's even more competitive. Especially with a lot of the schools, not everybody is in the same league now. Right. But back in the day, like when I played, the Pacific View League was, you had Rio, you had Pacifica, Oxnard, Channel Islands, and Wainimi. That was the division right there. That was like the city division. And, everybody knew each other. And then, you had your 5 non-league games that were like outside teams.
Yeah, people don't realize how big Oxnard is. That must have been a super competitive league that you were in.
Yeah, back then it was a very competitive league. Now it's like, you got Pacifica, now they're competing in the Mormoni League. That's the big league out here for us. They're playing Oaks Christian, St. Bonnie's, Bishop.
But isn't St. Bonnie's a small school?
I would say they're a small private school, but
But they got players?
They got players.
Really?
They're coming up. I know with their new coach Troy Hill. Like I've talked to him. They got a good culture going over there too. So it's gonna start getting competitive around here.
I would think that the bigger public schools have more talent and better players than the smaller private schools, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't they like? I mean, I didn't follow too much of the football around here till my son got involved. Not being from the area, but wasn't they like real good like 4 years ago or something?
Yeah, I think it was like 2 years ago that they went to state. They had a really good team, and then you got, especially with that Mormoni League, I would say maybe Bishop Diego's a private school. I'm not too sure about one, but Oaks Christian, St. Bonnie's, they're private schools.
Yeah, I know Oaks Christian. They take their sports very seriously.
And then you got Pacifica that's now in the Mormoni League. Now you got it's a public school making noise in a private school league.
Oh, it's primarily a private school.
Some of it is because I think they had one other public school that was Camarillo that was in that league too, but I think they're making a switch with that. I think Newberry Park's coming into that picture now, and Newberry Park's another school that's been making their way up and making noise too. So
is that the best league around for Ventura County?
I wouldn't say the best league. Every league's good because you always have that one team that's making noise. Like Ventura, they went all the way to state, just like Santa Paula. Santa Paula made the CIF, and then you got Pacifica.
I always thought that Pacifica was a higher league than Ventura.
They are in a higher league.
Higher division.
So yeah, they're a higher division. So their Mormoni league's higher than like the ones that Ventura plays in, and then the one that Santa Paula plays in. So I would say right now Pacifica is probably in the highest division. Like
Division 3.
yeah, no, I think that's the I think the playoff bracket, but I could be wrong. I think it is Division 3 that they're competing in, because I think when they won their state championship back in 2019, they were Division 6. So that, from 2019 to now, you went up 3 divisions. So yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, the bigger teams in LA, the like top two leagues.
Oh yeah. If you want to talk about Division 1, you're talking about modern day St. John Bosco, Centennial.
Are those all in LA?
That's all in LA. That's all Long Beach, LA teams. Just like I think it was Santa Margarita. They're Division 1. They're playing tonight against De La Salle. De La Salle is like the number 1 team up north, and then Santa Margarita is the number 1 team down here. So I think they're playing right after Pacifica's game
Where do they play?
at Saddleback. So they play at 8.
Where's that?
Orange County.
Oh, Orange County.
So I think Pacifica plays at 3:30, and then De La Salle and Santa Margarita plays right after them.
At the same place.
Yeah, at the same place. So it's gonna be a long day, because I think it's like a youth game, like a youth day for Saturday for them, because it's not just one game.
I bet some college coaches are out there.
Oh yeah, there's always college coaches out at even regular games, because everybody's trying to find the next player. So I think there's always scouting. It's just like youth football, we're always scouting. Yeah, so you got some you can't really say taking players, because you can't really take players, but people
Just let them know what's on the table, and if you want to come sit at this table, you're welcome.
Yeah, just like an old good friend of mine that actually played with us. He was a good asset with us this year, coaching wise, and then both his boys, Mario. Coach Mario, he was
Ventura boys.
Yeah, the Ventura boys. I played against them. We played against them since they were 10, and then they decided to make the switch this year, and then
they went to Ventura.
No, they played at Ventura Packers.
Oh, okay.
So and then they made the switch to come play with us this year.
Oh, they joined you.
Yeah, so they joined us, and they're boys. They got some talented boys.
Was a good addition to the team.
Yeah, they're definitely good additions to the team.
Disciplined kids.
Mario was also a good coach. He knows a lot of the offensive line, defensive line. He's the one that made the trenches, and adding him was was a good asset, because we played against him. I played against him since 10U ball, and every year we always talked about, hey, you're gonna come over here. He thought, no, are you gonna come over here? I was like, it's always one of those like, hey, hey, we gotta be on a team sooner or later, And then we finally got that opportunity to play with each other. Our senior year, the boys' last year, his boys, they came out to one practice. They haven't made the commitment yet. It was one of those like kind of like a tryout day where they just wanted to feel out. I remember, I think it was Mario, one of his boys. He already made his mind up. He's like, I really want to go play with Coach Zack and that team over there, and just the culture we had. And it was his other son, Roman.
Are they twins?
They're twins. Yeah, they're like, I think, a couple minutes apart from each other. Okay. Yeah, so I remember he was telling me, he's all, yeah, Mario already made the decision. He's all, it's about making Roman, see if he wants to play. And as soon as practice was over, he was like, hey, he's all, are we signing up, or what are we doing? And he was all excited. And I was like, we knew that they were going to make the transition over, and it was a fun year. They told us, they had more fun here with us than what they did with the Packers since how many years they were there. Wow. I think it was just the type of culture we had that we created around the boys.
Family.
Yeah, it's always a family.
Everybody say family, but we got a family.
Yeah, because we had the culture of us being a family. All our parents, kids, kids hung out outside of football. Parents, we always kept contact even after football season. Hey, what are we gonna do? Hey, let's go. Let's go hang out. Let the boys hang out, and then boys will do the boys things. The parents will hang out and do parent things, and it was. I think that was just the culture that we made since the 10 year.
Fishing trips with all the boys.
Yeah, it's fishing trips, and then taking the boys out to. We used to call because we never practiced Fridays, but we used to do team outings. Is who's playing at home this week on Friday, so we'll take them to a high school game. Parents will sit in the stands, and it's always funny because we'd be just sitting in the stands. It's like, hey, where's the kids at? And we'll look down at the field, and they're on the field. Like, what the? Like, how did they get on the field? Well, being water boys, and it's like, what the? Like, yeah, it was fun. The last 4 years, it was really fun.
Yeah, it's special when you've got a special group.
Yeah, it was definitely special with that group, and then all the additions we made, and all the parents that trusted us this year with all the new kids that we had. It was one of those years. It was probably one for the books.
Who are the rivals for the Oxnard Warriors? You mentioned the Packers. Are they?
I wouldn't say. I think it's more of like it all depends on the team. Like
it's just the way it is. Somebody have to run the town, So you can call it a rival. We got a few different teams in Oxnard. It's always fun to play the home, the other side, the team from the other side of town. Because you know them, like you say, coaches know coaches, kids know kids. So that makes a rival, And but it's all fun in football, But really about making these kids prepared for that next level.
And I think with the North Oxnard Warriors, we got the right people in the right position running that program. With Eli Mendez, the president of the Warriors, he's turned that program around to, making sure everybody feels like family when it comes to the parents feeling welcome, to the kids, to the coaches. I think this year was a way better year than previous years, but like this year, like North Oxnard Warriors, we did make a noise through every division. I think we had maybe every team made playoffs.
To the playoffs.
Yeah, every team made playoffs. We had our junior team made Super Bowl. We had some semifinalists. We had some Super Bowl finalists that went to D2 Super Bowl, and came up short. But I would say North Oxnard did make a noise this year, and I think they're going to continue making noise with all the future teams that are coming up. So I think that's a plus side to youth football. Is you gotta keep the ball rolling for the next team, next program.
Continuous improvement.
Yeah, there's always
you're in the organization and you don't see change. You don't see people trying to get better. Maybe you should move on. That's my motto: stronger today than yesterday, but not as strong as tomorrow.
Good leadership.
Yeah,
Makes a big difference.
Exactly.
Was this guy new this year?
No, it was his second year. He it was his first year last year, and he was
Is he was a football coach or like a business?
He's a businessman. Yeah, he's a businessman, but he was also he always wants to learn about the football world too. Coaching. Yeah, he has a kid that plays, and I know we talked about me coming back to coaching his son's team and getting him to be on that coaching staff. But it's probably hard to be a coach and be the president of the program at the same time. But so I know me and him discussed about me taking his son's team next year. But I told him when that time comes, we'll sit down, have that conversation, and go from there. But for now, let's just enjoy the moment, enjoy the success that we did this year as all 6 teams, and just keep the ball rolling after that.
Yeah. You guys have your banquet today, right?
We do have our banquet today.
The last hoorah.
It's the last hoorah. It's one of those where we talked about it since or when they're 10U, it's like, damn, imagine when they're seniors. And that was, just times here. Just like when we lost our game to our semifinals. We were one game short from the Super Bowl, but we had a very heart filling moment when that clock hit zero. We talked to the team after. It was
Some tears shed.
yeah, a lot of tears shedded. Parents, coaches,
Reality sets in.
yeah,
This is it, man.
yeah, that
Ride
was
is over.
yeah, that was that was a heartwarming night. A lot of these boys been with us, and then parents stuck around with us, trusted the last 4 years with their kids. So it was fun. It had, everything had to come to an end. But as long as we know the boys had fun, that's all that mattered. The boys had fun. They like they're
Make
gonna
sure they prepared for high school.
yeah, make sure they're prepared for high school because we always encourage all the players to keep going. Yeah, even if you don't play football, find something else you have to do. Find another hobby. Join a club at school. Play another sport. Maybe football wasn't your sport, but you could go succeed in something else.
Yeah, it's a good way to make friends.
Yeah.
If
Oh,
you're
yeah.
a freshman.
Yeah.
I heard from some of the kids, talking about it being the end, what they're gonna miss most, and that was a lot of answers. Being with my friends. I'm not gonna see my friends no more. My family.
Yeah. No more. Was it Monday through Friday or Monday through Thursday practices, and no more team dinners. We had a lot of kids on the team that always waited till Thursday. We get to Thursday's practice. Hey, coach, what's for team dinner today? We had that was always Kaysen and
Who's
Luke.
cooking?
Luke Kaysen was a great kid, first year player. He was definitely an impact player. And then Luke's been with us since 10U. So
It's my dog, Luke.
yeah, it's just all the kids from Dre to Aiden to Miguel, Tim, all these kids on the team. Every kid was special in their own way.
Yeah.
And they did what they did on the field. And us coaches, I know we couldn't ask any more of them because at the end of the day, like I said, we had a bad season last year, turned it around, won 6 games, lost 2. I think that's we always told the kids what's the end goal for the season? Super Bowl. Everybody wants to win the Super Bowl. That was like the standard. Like we're here to work, we're here to win, we're here to go get that Super Bowl. Especially we were 1 game shy of it from playing, and it's always gonna be that like what could we have done to make it better.
Still reliving the game.
Yeah, we're still reliving that game.
Rewinding it in the
I think
head.
that's the hardest thing as a coach because when you win a tough one, it'll sit with you for a couple weeks, couple months. Like, damn, what could I have done to make it better?
Was it close?
It was close.
It was close.
It was close.
We even took the lead at a point.
Yeah, we took a lead at the point. Played against a team that was
Undefeated.
Yeah, they were undefeated. We played them.
And don't get me wrong, a win is a win. No excuses. You don't get to pick your rivalries. I mean, your challenges. But they had play ups. Play downs, I should say.
Yeah.
It's like
Older
Yeah,
players.
that's
They had pretty much high school kids on the team that we was playing against, and we had rookies. We had 7, 8 kids playing for the first time. So I was proud of our boys. Yeah, we wanted to win, but
I think the biggest thing is because we played this team in the regular season, and it wasn't the prettiest win or prettiest loss. Yeah. But the thing is, they came in that semi game with a chip on their shoulder, and like Coach Doc said, I couldn't ask, he couldn't ask anything more of those kids because they, the score was a lot different than it was the first time, and that team had their.
They have a good team though. They got a good team, good coaches down.
Yeah, it was a good team. They
They went on all the way and won the Super Bowl. So
That helps a little.
yeah, and the thing is too, because I knew that coach too, because there was a team kind of like an outside football thing called FBU. It's a Nationals youth football. I know talking to him after the game, this is probably like the hardest game they played all year. Is when they played us because everybody else they played, it was just like a rollover. But when they played us, it was always like, oh damn, like it was we
was a
gave over.
dogfight.
Yeah, it was definitely a dogfight, especially that semifinals. It was definitely a dogfight. It was those kids. Yeah, back to what I said earlier. It was when we had to pull a kid off the field to give him a break. They didn't want to come out. Did not want to come out because they just want to stay in the fight.
Yeah. Anything you guys want to leave us with? We've been chatting for about an hour.
Oh wow. No, I think just perspective of youth football. There's a lot of coaches out there that are giving back to the community. At the end of the day, we don't get paid for this. We're
Zip, nothing?
No, nothing.
Totally volunteer?
It's totally volunteer.
That victory or that Super Bowl at the end of the season is the paycheck.
Yep.
And seeing these kids progress,
I think that's the biggest victory. Seeing the kids progress, never taking a step back. I think that's the biggest paycheck of all. Just they're learning every year. You don't have so and so taking 2 steps back while everybody's taking 5 steps forward. I think that's winning to the youth organization. Having these kids keep moving forward and never taking a step back and not learning anything because we learn from them just like they learn from us. You're always gonna keep learning at the end of the day.
All right. Well, I've been speaking with Coach Zack and Coach Doc of the Oxnard Warriors. Thank you guys for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.